Hello, welcome to this episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry with cool and interesting stories. Today, my guest is Remí Vansteelandt. Am I pronouncing the surname correctly?
I don't know myself. Like, I don't speak Dutch, so let's just say it's good.
Fair enough. And are you Dutch yourself? Is your family Dutch?
No, some of my family is from Belgium, so they're Flemish, but I'm French myself.
You're French. Fair enough. So yeah, Remy was the winner of the JS13k competition, recently. So congratulations on that, Remy. Your game was really amazing.
Thank you.
And so, do you want to talk to tell the audience a little bit about what JS13k is, and then also what you made?
Yeah, absolutely. So, JS13k Games is like a yearly game development competition that it's been going on since 2012. So it's once a year from August 13th to September 13th, and it's organized by Andre Mazur. And the idea is that you're supposed to make a JavaScript game in 13 kilobytes zipped, um, and yeah, you just deliver like a zip with an index.html in there, and then once you run it, it's supposed to just run on its own, be 13 kilobytes at most, and then it's supposed to be a game. Yes, and so there's you get a few prizes from that competition, such as a T-shirt.
Yeah.
But really, the great thing about JS13k is like there's a really cool community, and you get to learn a ton of stuff because you write code in a way that you probably wouldn't do normally, and it's really cool because you get to make something fun within a month.
Okay, that's cool. Like, how did you hear about JS13k? Obviously, it's been running for over 10 years, but how did you personally come across it?
Yeah, so there used to be a community of HTML5 game developers, which was called HTML5GameDevs.com, I think. And that's when like Andre started posting about it there. And a company that I was about to work for at the time was actually sponsoring the event. That gave me extra incentive to kind of try it. Um, I didn't do great on the first year, but I've actually found it really fun because it's just a month. Like you don't have to like work a ton because like it's not over a weekend, so you have a little bit of a buffer time. Um, but yeah, that's
Okay, so you mentioned the fact that it's over a month. It's not like over a weekend of 24 hours where there are tech jams, coding jam, game jams that are over such a short period of time. Have you tried any of those gaming jams that are over such a short period of time and it is like go go go, hardly any sleep, and you look like a zombie afterwards?
yeah. I assume you're kind of referring to Ludum Dare or Ludum Dare, the one that's the most famous. I personally, I've only ever tried one smaller game jam, which was again HM5 focused. But no, I usually don't take part in those jams mostly because like it's a full weekend that you have to spend like
Hmm.
doing a game from zero to like a fully playable thing. Um, which is why I mentioned I really like the idea of having a month to do something. Um, gives you a little bit of time to think about it and not kill yourself doing it.
Oh yeah, 100%. And he also gives you time to, make some mistakes. You could be 2 weeks into it and you could decide, oh, I don't want to go for this particular game, or there's some particular mechanic that I want to heavily, revise. And whereas, you can't practically do that on a weekend game jam, game jam or code jam. I've been to some of these code jams before, and I've seen people over a weekend, suddenly change direction. It usually doesn't work that well because again you don't have much time. You might go from having 48 hours to only having 20 hours, and now you haven't had much sleep. You just want to get it over and done with. And so yeah, there is that huge part of doing like one of those shorter jams. So what attracted you to like the JavaScript, because obviously it's JavaScript in nature, and it's small, like 13 kilobytes. It's not okay. It can be as big as you want, because there are some where they don't really have much requirements around size, and it's like okay, the bigger the better almost.
Yeah. Let me go back a little bit. Um, let me go back in history to kind of explain that. So like back in 2012, I was learning Flash and building a few games. That was my first time kind of want to try to build a real game. And what I found online is that everyone was saying that Flash was about to disappear. It was about to be replaced by HTML5, which was going to be the next big thing. So I kind of started learning it because I already knew a little bit of JavaScript, uh, and I realized that I could make games somewhat easily and quickly. And back then, there weren't a ton of people working on these kinds of games, so I kind of got into it. And then, as I kind of got more involved into it, involved with publishers and these kinds of things, JS13k just popped on my feed, um, and it was like something that there had already been one edition before the first one I joined, and it's like the games that were built during that first edition were already really good. And I also thought it was a fun challenge. I had a bunch of free time, and I was like, why not? Why not try it? Like, it's not going to take me ages. It probably can take me a week to put something together. And then ever since, I've participated every year because it's just a really fun competition with a really cool community.
Okay, so with the competition, I'm sure there's other people out there that are interested in either JS13k or these sort of coding competitions. What advice would you give to them? Because it's a little different to obviously having a regular job or even doing your own project.
Um, Oh, that's a tough one. But earlier you kind of mentioned how when you're in a sometimes in a hackathon you're going to switch direction halfway, and that's usually not going great because then you're not committed to one idea. My advice, sort of what has been working well for me, is to kind of like not start writing code right away. Don't build a game right away. Instead, come up with an idea that you have uh, that you clearly have in your head. Like have a vision of the game you want to build. For example, I want an action game, and I want the controls to be that way. I want it to look that other game. Like set an objective, something you want to reach, and then make sure you fully believe that it's possible and it's going to be a fun game, and then fully commit to it. So like just in a few words, like come up with an idea really quickly and commit.
Okay, I mean that's very a, an interesting approach. Plus, also, yeah, not jumping into coding straight away. I guess thinking about it, designing it a little bit, helps as well. Because otherwise, you're just haphazardly going into coding. You don't really have an idea of what you're making, and people do want to just jump into the code inside of, and I would say that applies if you're doing your own, let's say, indie project. Also applies if you've got like a coding job as well and you're working on some sort of feature of a bigger application, and maybe you've got a week to do it instead of diving right into code. Lay it out, design it, plan that sort of stuff. So I think that definitely helps. So you mentioned Flash, and obviously Flash is no longer around, and HTML5 has taken over. Fun fact, I don't know if you knew this, I only recently found out because I had somebody on the podcast that used to work at Naughty Dog. He said that Uncharted 4, they used Flash to design the menu system.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about that in the past. I don't have any particular insights on how they do it, but yeah, I think it's just Flash was like when it was a thing was a pretty great tool for designers, more so than for developers. You could come up with like really cool animations really quickly, um, and you don't have the same constraints as like if you're building the game itself. Like you don't need to be like super efficient in terms of memory and such. You just want something that's cool looking, that's intuitive, and that you can probably iterate on quickly.
Yeah, I think like what they used it for, and including HTML, is because it was a great way, like you said, of just quickly getting stuff done. Mocking up some sort of menu design, and then they could translate that over, either using some sort of tool that might translate it into code, or like some sort of intermediary coder slash designer might actually translate it. But it was a great way of the designers doing something in a kind of in a technical way, but still having a lot of power with their limited technical knowledge, but obviously advanced artistic knowledge.
Hmm. Yep.
With the JS13k competition, what was your game? Like, do you want to describe the game and why you chose that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, like I've been participating in JS13k since 2013. So I've made a lot of games along the way, but I always kind of try to do something a little bit different. Either something that I consider uh, innovat- innovative for the game space, like doing something kind of unique, or something that's kind of new for myself. Like so I can pick up like new new things to learn or like kind of challenge myself. So the game I made for this year's JS13K was called Path to Glory. It's a 2D action game. Um, in terms of gameplay, it's kind of like if you ever played the Batman Arkham games. It's kind of similar, or like at least that was my initial idea. I wanted to make something like with quick but simple combat, where you can like ping pong between enemies, and you can attack, you can roll, or you can block. It's kind of like a three button. Like there's only three buttons in the game, so I kind of adapted that with the theme for JS13K, which was 13th century. So I went for the story of a knight that is in a land that's being invaded by some imaginary foreign nation. And the knight is just going through waves of enemies until he reaches the emperor. And the goal is to slay that emperor, and then that's the end of the game.
Okay. And what sort of games did you do in the past?
Ooh, I have I've done many games. Obviously, I haven't.
Have you participated in every single one since 2013, or is it on and off?
Um, sorry, could you repeat that one again?
Yeah. I was just asking, have you participated in every game jam, JS13k game jam since 2013, or have you been doing it like on off? Some years you don't do it, some years you do it.
No, I've been doing it every single year since 2013. It's kind of like the way I describe it. It's my yearly excuse to write terrible code. Because of the 13 kilobyte constraint, you have to write
Yeah.
code in certain ways that you probably shouldn't in your like in a regular project because there's some shortcuts that you need to take just to use fewer functions or like to reuse a lot of code that's going to be very hard to read and maintain. I've had to like go back into my JS13k code bases after months, and it's been very difficult because it's very um, so like a lot of it is spaghetti code because some like structuring a code base well actually takes a lot of room in terms of bytes, like in terms of how much code you're going to need to write. Um, so like sometimes, yeah, you really need to write spaghetti code or like use like some math functions that are like very convoluted just to get us simple effects.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's understandable. When you have the when you have either one or two constraints, whether you have the size constraint that you have with JS13k, or like the time constraint. Like if you're doing a 48-hour code jam, you're not that focused on the design of the code. Yeah, you might deploy some certain design decisions, maybe object oriented program, but that'd be more just to enhance it for you. Like if you're doing something really simple, like it might just be quicker just to do it in one file, for example, and then go from there. Plus, also, yeah, I know you're saying on like an actual project, you may not do it the same way, and you might have it might be designed and coded a little bit better. But when you're starting off a project, or a feature, you might start off in that kind of you know haphazard way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also like when you're doing it for a game jam, there's a good chance you're not going to have to. You're just going to be working on that code base for maybe a week, maybe a month, sometimes even just a weekend. While if you're working on like a like a bigger scale project or something um, for a daytime job, you're probably going to want to be able to maintain it for months or years. So you're going to structure your code in a very different way. If you write something for just a game jam, the only time you're going to be working on it is when you're still going to have full context on it. You're going to be like, oh, this function is terrible, but I wrote it and I know what it does and I know why it's built that way, versus something that you would have to pick up months later.
Oh, 100%. There is definitely that element of it. When you're going to have to interact with it, or other developers are going to have to interact with it again and again. It's going to be in a live application. You're going to have to maintain it, extend it, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, you're going to put a certain decisions into coding it and designing. But the other thing is, again, you might code it in a poor way, even for an actual project, but it doesn't mean that's the code that will be get pushed, to the live, master branch, for example. So like, there's also that. Whereas, yeah, your game, does technically go live with the competition, but again, it isn't really to be used by loads of users. It is like, okay, here we go. Here's what I've produced, and yeah, I might eventually turn it into a full-fledged game, try and put it onto, I don't know, itch, or Google Play Store, iOS, the Apple App Store. But then you'll probably refine it. That's a good segue. Have you ever pursued any of the games that you made beyond the JS13k competition to add more features, refine it, and maybe make some money out of them?
Yeah, well, that's actually a very timely question. Um, one of the So I did it a few times. The one I would mention is an entry I made in 2016, I think. That was called Glitch Buster. It was kind of a roguelike or platformer inspired by Spelunky. The idea was that you were a little character in a black and white world, and the world was kind of a metaphor for um, a code base, and the code base was broken. It had memory leaks and glitches, and the goal was to find the glitches, fix them, and then go deeper in the code base, fix the next glitch. Uh,
Um,
so that entry ranked pretty well that year within JS13k, but I really, really wanted to push it further. And so what I decided to do was I rewrote the entire game from scratch, so I could my final goal was to push it on Steam and sell it for $5. Um, so I did that for, I think it took me a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Uh, and yeah, I pushed the game a lot further. Like, it had very little to do with the original version because I didn't have the 13 kilobyte limitation anymore. So I could have
mhm.
slightly nicer graphics. I could have post processing effects. I could have music. I could have power ups and all these kinds of things. So that's something I did. Uh, it
Is that
wasn't
still available?
it is available on Steam. It was not a financial success, I would say, but it's still something that I'm still proud of it because I had to I had to pick up a ton of things along the way. For instance, that was the first project that I worked on for over a year. Usually, my projects before that would take me maybe a month. This one was quite more ambitious. And then I got a little bit of experience pushing stuff to Steam, which is kind of a skill on its own. Like, Steam is kind of a beast. And then other things like you have a web game, but now you need to make it a standalone app. So you need to package it with something else. So I did that. And more recently, I'm actually currently redoing or remastering one of my more recent entries, which was called Ninja versus Evil Corp. And the idea is that I'm hoping to publish it, to get publishers to pick it up, so it can be played online. Um, and I'm kind of taking the same approach. I'm rewriting the game from scratch because I want to have a proper menu system. I want to have music. I want to have all these things, and they're very difficult to add if you have to maintain a JS13k code base that is like it's probably like 3 years old by now. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So, you made an interesting point about, publishing it to Steam and the fact that that's a skill in itself. That, I mean, that's, something that I come across a lot of developers, especially, programmers that will underestimate certain aspects of the process. Like they'll think that, okay, the coding is the main part and like it's kind of the idea as well. And beyond that, once they've finished it, that's it, like they've done. And he said there's so much more. Like one of the pieces of advice I generally give to people that want to publish games and apps is publish a game or an app. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like if it's a game, it could be a clone, it could be like tic-tac-toe, Pong, whatever. Like first get that done in obviously a timely manner. Then you have, again, I don't know with Steam, I've never published on Steam, but I've published with Google Play, with Apple App Store, and there's like restrictions, like you've got to have a certain icons, like certain size, then certain like pixel density. You've got to have them named a certain way. You've got to make sure your APIs are updated, and sometimes you'll get an error message saying that, okay, your app can't be accepted. There's some error, and sometimes the error message does not even indicate with detail what's wrong. Like it could be a matter of you've got to change the name of a file to fit their naming standards, but that may not be evident from the error message, and then you're going around trying to figure it out, googling it, going on Reddit, going on Stack Overflow, for example, on YouTube, and just trying to find out what the issue is. And I'm sure it's with Steam as well, they have certain standards that they want you to publish your game through, and people don't understand that. And what they end up doing is they think the technical part's the main thing, and they fall on that. Like they just don't understand that's a important part, or they don't understand like marketing is an important part, or like I've seen developers where they'll be making a mobile game and they're just testing it on the simulator, and I'm like, put it on a physical device. Yes, a physical device will actually have more power, but it might not work. Like it sounds crazy, but that, okay, it works on simulator, why wouldn't it work on the physical device? But that's a very real problem that can occur. So as soon as you can get it into the actual live environment, whether that's from simulator to device, or whether that's from just a game to actually publish, because then when you actually have that game or application idea that you really want to pursue for 2 years, last thing you want to do is work on it, be so tired and be so drained at the end that you have issues with publishing it, to the store, to Steam, or to itch, or wherever, and marketing, and all that other stuff, because you've spent so much of your blood, sweat, and tears. You want that side of it just to be, ready to go. Like you want to be in a position where you just know how to do that. You want it to be like, oh, you know how to breathe. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well with publishing on Steam.
yeah. I think if I were to sum it up, I would say like, and a lot of game developers would agree with that, is that it's, or even outside of game development, but it's just really hard to get a product to the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's a few aspects that you mentioned that are indeed very important. So like there's the technical aspect, like how do I submit to Steam and get Steam to accept it? How do I get
Mm-hmm.
Google Play to accept my app? And there's a ton of things, and that's why QA and release management are jobs on their own because they require a bunch of skills. But yeah, like definitely, when I like my latest game that I pushed on Steam, I remember it taking me like over a weekend just to even get the Steam page up because it had so many requirements. It was like, oh, you need this icon for this version, for this layout. Okay, now you need this description. Okay, now you need the minimum requirements. And I was like, oh, well, how do I find that? How do I know how much RAM I need to run the game? Um, so it's like anyone that has ever published anything on Steam will tell you that it's a beast. And then you also kind of touched on the marketing side of things, which I agree is also not something you should underestimate. Like a lot of the 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 success of any game is determined by how you're gonna market it. Do you know your audience? Did you test it with people? Did you get people's opinion? Is that a game that people actually want to play? Do they understand the game? Um, it's really hard to get people's attention, especially if you're self-publishing. Um, but yeah, and I can definitely attest to that as in my game that I mentioned earlier, not being a success. Uh, Probably because I didn't do any of these things. I didn't know my audience, or I didn't try to market it anywhere, or at least not in the correct places. Um, a lot of people tend to kind of make the mistake that uh, tend to think that I'm publishing like videos and progress on game dev forums and or game dev hashtags on Twitter. Uh, but really, like your audience is not game devs; it's players, and the players don't look at those game dev things.
No, most don't.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the only scenario where they might is where it's a game that's ongoing and they have an interest in it, and they're kind of like, if it's kind of maybe a community game, and the community, like Minecraft, for example, like, Notch did post, dev logs and dev logs online. But again, it was kind of community driven. It was, okay, here's the new version, here's the new version. And because the game was very, okay, we're gonna create stuff in the game, mods, mod stuff as well, it kind of suited it. But where if it's like a mobile game and you're releasing it and that's it for the most part, and then they just play and try and get a high score, yeah, you're right. The developer community is not necessarily your target audience. Not that there can't be a crossover, there definitely will be. Usually a game dev will be a gamer at heart, and then a gamer may want to be a game dev as well. But what you really want, again, is to target those gamers. But I want to, go back to that bit that you said about minimum requirements. You said, how do you figure that out? Like, how did you figure that out? Like, that's really interesting. Like, that's something, again, because I haven't published on, Steam and doing it via Apple. That's not really, there isn't that sort of requirement for you to figure that out. It kind of just based on the APIs that you use, it determines which device will be the minimum, for example.
Yeah. Well, obviously, in terms of APIs, like kind of what you're building for. Like it might not be relevant anymore, but back in the day, like it was like, are you building for 32-bit devices, or are you also are you only building for 64-bit? Um, so like, there's that part that's pretty easy. The part that I find hard is for example, it's gonna ask you what minimum processor can run your game and what's the recommended way. Sorry, what's the recommended requirement? Um, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have not figured that part out. Aside from like running it on the devices that I had available to me. Um, so for me, it was as a small developer, I just did what I could. So for example, there are things that are easy, like how much disk space your game is going to require. But in terms of RAM and processor, these kind of things, like I mostly had to eyeball it. So if anyone knows how to do it, I would also like to learn from them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing your games were 2D in nature and not,
Mhm.
intense, in terms of the requirements. So I feel like it's a little easier there because, you can kind of, Google and figure out the minimum just to get the OS running, for example, and a little bit extra. Whereas if it's a kind of a 3D game, it's not super high end, but it's like that mid level, then it's like, okay, you want to get that GPU and CPU right. Whereas if you're on more on the, the lower end in terms of the technical aspect of it, yeah, you can put like, well, like what's the realistic minimum amount of RAM? Obviously not half a gig because OS needs more than, but like 2 4 gig, something like that. Something, some basic CPU and like some sort of really basic GPU, and they can look at Steam statistics as well. What are the most common ones? What are the the low ones on that? But yeah, if you do have a mid-level 3D game, the difference between having one graphics card as the minimum and another, if you get that wrong, just in terms of putting it on the spec, might mean that a bunch of gamers think, okay, I don't have that graphics card. I'm just not gonna, buy it, because obviously you're buying it. It's not a free, product. So because you're buying it, the gamer might think, okay, I don't have an RTX, I don't know, 2070.
Mhm.
I've got a 2060, for example. That means I can't play. Whereas it might turn out to, the GTX 1070, was fine with it. But because you just based it on what you had and that was a decent experience, like your 2070, for example, then you might actually eliminate a lot of games. But yeah, it would be interesting to hear from anyone that is listening and that has gone through it, that knows how to kind of accurately benchmark your game for specification. But I find, I'm sure, because you're a gamer yourself, I'm sure you've had this where you see specifications for a game come out and you're like, my PC can definitely handle the recommended, requirements. Then you play it and you're just like, I'm barely getting medium at a decent frame rate. So, requirements are kind of one of the bogus things that, for the most part, don't really accurately represent. Usually, especially with the higher end games, whatever it is, you're probably going to need a bit more anyway.
Yeah, you can probably somewhat easily figure out the minimum requirements if you have the hardware to test it. Um, but it's like how you mentioned, like, oh, my game can run this, and then like it actually happened to me recently. I was like, my PC can definitely run this, but the game is has a few optimization issues, which make it so that it should be able to run it fine. But then you run it and it runs at like 30 FPS in some places, 15 FPS in other places. Um, and I've kind of me as being someone that builds games for web first and foremost, I do kind of run into these kinds of issues a little bit, um, probably a little bit more than someone who would write like games with Unity or Unreal, like proper game engines. Mostly because the web stuff is always going to be inherently a little bit slower. So for a game that I released recently, where it was very like thick pixel art, like very small resolution, I actually ran into some performance issues because of that. Because the core technology that I used is not super fast. Luckily, I was able to optimize some of it. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes like it doesn't run the way you would expect. But I think it's also because as a developer, you need to spend time optimizing things.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's always the way. How long does it take to get a game accepted on Steam? So, from the time that get everything ready, all the metadata, all the icons, etc., and you submit it, usually from your experience, how long does it take for it to be accepted or even get a rejection and some sort of feedback? And also, follow-up question, what's their feedback like? Is it very useful or is it pretty generic and rubbish like Apple's?
Yeah, so from my experience, Steam, from the time there's a few steps in the release process. First, you need to set up your Steam page, and then they need to approve it, so you can like be visible on the Steam marketplace. So it's just like making sure that your screenshots are good, that your description is good. I think that in my experience, that was less than a week, so it's somewhat quick. Uh, and then the next step in the process um, is that you want them to approve your build. So it's um, so by once you've set up the Steam page, it doesn't mean that you actually have a binary push to Steam. It doesn't mean that you have something that's actually playable. It just means that you have a page on Steam. After that, you need to push a binary and ask Steam to look at it. And I think, in my experience, it would take them 2, 3, maybe 4 days uh, to look at it and approve or reject it. And I think and then the last step is to actually release the game to everyone. And I think that one was pretty quick. I don't remember exactly how long it took, but it was pretty quick. You do need to be careful though with the build approval, so the second step, because Steam, like they need to approve it before you can, because they have that delay. You can't like submit it for approval and then expect to release like right away. Like you need to take that into account. Once you've got your build approved, though, you can push as many builds as you want. And Steam is not. It's not like Apple, where every new build needs to be approved. Steam just lets you push whatever build you want once you've got one that was working. Um,
Okay, so once you have the initial one accepted, you could, do version 1.1 if there's, let's say, a bug that you notice, and it'll be available immediately or within a day or so once it's propagated, or I guess.
yeah, and it's. I think it's actually much quicker than that. But yeah, they just want you to submit a build that's mostly functional. For example, if you say I have full control support, you're gonna need to be able to use the control and menus. Like you need to be able to use everything without using your mouse and keyboard. Um, and there are a few other requirements like that. So they're just going to make sure that all of this works. They're going to make sure that the game launches or whatever. And then once you've got that, they kind of let you um, do whatever. Because on its own, it's already kind of hard to get to that state. Um, Now you did kind of ask what their feedback was like. What I found from Steam compared to Apple specifically, is that Steam is a lot more detailed in how they reject you. Um, for example, I pushed a game on early access on Steam, and when you push something on early access, you need to say, why is it in early access? How long is early access gonna last? You need to give all these details, and Steam is they're gonna be very specific in which bullet points you failed, and they're gonna be like, oh, this one you failed because you can't promise this, or you can't promise that, or you can't do this. They're gonna tell you exactly what you failed on, and they're also gonna give you suggestions on um, how to improve things. So, for example, they're gonna tell you this bullet point, it's fine. We're gonna let you. We're not gonna prevent you from publishing, but ideally, we would like you to address that. Um, and they have the experience to know what works well in their marketplace. So they really have. It's pretty detailed.
Okay, that's really good to hear. So, what are the costs associated with publishing on Steam? Because with Google, there's some costs. With Apple, there's costs. What are the costs, if any, for publishing on Steam?
Um, if I remember correctly, it's to publish a new app on Steam. You just need to pay $100 American, and then you
So,
can
so
start
per game or per app,
per game.
basically.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
used to be different when we had the green light system, where it
I
was like you
remember that.
paid the $100, and then your goal was to get as many thumbs up on green light. And then once you got the thumbs up, you could publish your app. But I think you only had to pay that fee once, and you could publish as many games as you want, as long as you got a certain number of thumbs up. Now it's straight up, you need to pay $100 per game, as opposed to like I think Google Play is you pay it once and then you can publish
Yeah,
whatever, and I think Apple is just same thing. You pay for the
yearly, yes.
developer account.
Yeah, but you pay yearly on Apple. It's a subscription.
Oh, okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, so you pay again, and my pricing might be a bit outdated now, but it was a 99 like $100 a year. Again, I think it may have gone up a bit, but yeah, it was like every single year you would pay, and yeah, that was one part of it. And if I recall correctly, I might be incorrect in this. So if anyone's listening and they know I'm incorrect, let me know. But if I recall correctly, if you didn't, let's say if I paid the $99 Apple fee, published a game for 2 years, I kept paying the $99 fee, but then after 2 years I stopped paying it. I think my app would no longer be live. I think it was per account, but if you basically stop paying, any games or applications that were live associated with that account would now go not live, unpublished, until you repaid their fee and made them live again. Again, I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. Again, I
Yeah, I
might
would.
be incorrect.
I don't know myself, but that would not surprise me based
Sound
off
like
what
Apple.
Apple does in general. Yeah.
Oh yeah, one
I
hundred
kind of
percent.
wanted to add something to like that topic, like the cost of publishing on these platforms um, is like roughly $100 per platform. Um, that's only like the minimum requirement cost, because we kind of touched on marketing earlier. Um, there's some costs that you might have. For example, on Steam, you need to have a trailer, and that trailer, do you need to pay someone to do it, or if you're going to do it yourself, you might need to, like, I don't know, buy some assets or do some things, and like even spending time on it is kind of its own cost. So that's also something that maybe doesn't need to be underestimated.
Yeah, I mean 100%. It's like, yeah, you might only have $100 maybe upfront once for the game or the account, but yeah, there are other costs associated, especially if you're really serious about your game or application. Unless you have a solid team of, let's say, 4 or 5 people. That's some people doing art, some people doing the coding, maybe one person like kind of manager slash social media slash maybe
Hmm.
video creation, or maybe the artist can. If you're just a solo indie developer, there's two of you, an artist and a programmer, yeah, you're definitely gonna. If you want to do it seriously and you want to do it well, you will have to spend a bit of money, and you may even have to spend a bit of money on equipment as well. Again, that's usually more of an upfront cost. But let's say if you want to do mobile dev and you want to make sure you can publish on iOS as well, because that's a huge market financially speaking. You're probably going to get the most money from publishing on iOS versus Android. It's just the way it is. And let's say you've only got an Android phone, using a simulator will only get you so far, and you'll need a physical device. Again, it could be vice versa as well. You might have iOS and you might want to publish it on Google Play, and you might get a cheap Android device. So there are those costs associated with it as well. So again, just something to bear in mind. And there's obviously the time cost as well, because you might be spending evenings or not working, or working less, part-time, doing it on weekends, for example, and holidays, missing time with family, friends, and maybe other important events as well.
Hmm. Um, yeah, sorry,
So,
got nothing to add there. Sorry.
oh no, okay,
Go.
fair enough. Yeah, the you mentioned that you're in the process of doing a remaster of one of your old games, and also you're going to look for some publishers. How do you plan, or how are you going about that? Again, I think that'll be very valuable for the listeners, because again, they'll might make a game. They'll try and release it. They get past those hurdles. The ultimate goal is for it to be successful, and one of the ways it can be successful is if a publisher picks it up and they put some of their marketing, behind it. That's definitely one of the, ways of going about it. But again, it's not as simple as saying, "Hey EA, hey, Rovio," or actually Rovio is not the publisher, the developer, but like, "Hey, whoever, publish my game." Like, some of these ones don't even have ways of contacting them to publish your game. So, like, how are you going about it and planning on going about it?
Yeah, let me just roll back a tiny bit on that one. Um, I think so. You mentioned how the success was to be picked up by a publisher. I do think there's depending on how you approach game dev, success could be defined differently. So, for example, for me, it has been mostly a hobby for several years. I'm slowly starting to make it not a hobby anymore. But if you consider it a hobby, the success can just be you made something. So I kind of do want to insist on that. You don't need to make something that is played by millions of people for it to consider it successful. The fact that if you're even able to publish something and have a few people play it, I think it's something to be proud of, and to me, that's success on its own. Now, to kind of get a publisher, so I can only speak for my experience as a web game developer. Um, Usually, there's a few companies that are usually gonna, either you're somewhat public, and those companies are going to contact you, and they're going to ask you, hey, we would like to publish your game on our website, would you like to work with us? Or you can reach out directly and tell them, hey, here's my catalog, or here's that game that I'm working on, are you interested in publishing it? And then usually, if the conversation goes forward, then you can negotiate things like, do they want an exclusive or a non-exclusive license? So exclusive license would be the game can only be published on our website, and you can't sell it to anywhere else. Well, non-exclusive would be like, I sell you the license, and I can do whatever with other publishers. And then there are other terms like, do you want to do a flat fee where we pay you that much and we get the game, and we just get the game, or do you want to do revenue share where you're going to put ads on the game, and for example, developer is going to get 50% and then publisher gets the other 50%. And then, yeah, these are the like kind of main terms you want to go for if you're a web game developer. Obviously, I don't have the experience when it comes to like having a publisher on Steam for desktop games or for consoles.
Okay, so going way back, what made you get into programming?
Oh, it was yeah, that goes way back. So back in the day, I was kind of hanging out on forums online, mostly around comic books, so like Marvel comics kind of stuff. And I was chatting with the webmasters, which I guess is a word that we don't really use anymore. And they pointed me to those like a very famous French website that had tutorials for how to make websites. And so I was about 14 back in the day, and I was like, oh, okay, let's pick it up. Let's see how to make a website. And so I started picking up HTML and CSS and made kind of a very simple website around Spider-Man. And then along the way, I also picked up PHP. And I kind of realized that I really enjoyed spending long hours writing spaghetti PHP code. I just really liked building something and then seeing it work. So that's kind of what got me into programming. And so I did that for a few years, and then it was time to go to university, and I didn't know where to go. And so I went to one of those fairs where a bunch of schools are there to present what they do. And I found this computer school, and I was like, hey, I actually like doing PHP. Why wouldn't I go to school to learn more of that? And then maybe make it my job one day. And then, I don't know, like 15 years later, I'm still writing code after starting with just like making a Spider-Man website.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy where, sometimes things, start off. So what do you like? What's your main thing nowadays? Are you just working on JavaScript, HTML games, doing competitions? Like, do you have a job, freelance? Like, what are you doing nowadays?
Yeah, so currently I am a native iOS and I'm a native iOS and Android developer during the day. So I build the apps like mostly social apps. So I work for a company called Bunch currently, and then I do games as a kind of a side hustle. Going to next year, I'm hoping that I can like push the game side of it a little bit more, see what kind of if I can make it sustainable. Hopefully, I can just make games all day long and make it my job. But yeah.
Okay, so how do you find doing native development, and is it stuff like mainly Kotlin and Swift, or do you do some old school Java and Objective C as well?
Luckily, I don't think there are many people still doing Java and Objective C on native, so I'm mostly doing Swift and Kotlin. Um, the company that I currently work for, we do Kotlin multi-platform. The idea is that you write your code base mostly in Kotlin, and then you can export a binary to iOS, and then iOS can pick it up and make update its own UI based on the Kotlin code base. So the idea is that you write everything like the core of your app once, and then the UI. Like for example, you want the iOS app, you're gonna write your UI in Swift or in whatever you use on iOS, and you just plug it into um, the Kotlin core. Uh, I find it very different from game development because um, you have very different constraints. One, like the way I would describe it is that if you're making a game, you need to run your algorithms about 60 times a second, versus if you're making an app, you're going to press a button, it's going to make a network request, display something. It's going to be kind of a one-off, but it's not going to be. It's really going to be something that you need to do 60 times a second.
Yeah, it's
Um,
more event based than just consistently rendering. Obviously, there are scenarios where it might not be constantly, maybe some sort of turn based game, and even then, you might have certain UI elements that do need to be updated multiple times a second, or at least once a second, for example, if you have a timer. But yeah, that's definitely something that I've seen people that haven't done game dev and they kind of are exposed to game dev in whatever capacity, and the idea of a game loop is just it's such a foreign concept because they don't have that idea. They just have like a starting screen, and then like if you click this, it goes to this other page, and then you click this and it goes to this other page, and you click this, it triggers a network event like you were saying. Whereas on games it's like, nope, this is constantly running 60 frames times a second, maybe more.
yeah, and I think because of that simple like from that simple difference that you need to run something 60 times a second, you get a few things that are different out of it. So, for example, debugging feels very different to me. You can't I mean, you could put in a debugger, but often your issues are not going to be crashes. They're going to be more like, this collision doesn't feel right. I
Yeah.
wonder why these two systems don't work well together. Um, so there's that, and then I think there's also, if you just build an app or a website, you can kind of create things in memory and not really worry about them. Like I can create a giant object with a million properties, and that's okay because it's just going to be used once and then it's going to disappear. When you do something 60 times a second, you can't really do that, and you have to do a lot of things like reusable, like recycling things. Um, so, for example, if I have a mesh, um, it's like I can't create that mesh for every. For example, if I have an explosion and I want to show like a sphere for it, um, I can't just allocate a sphere for every explosion because that would be a lot of memory allocations and then freeing. The the way that you would do it would probably be to allocate the sphere once, and then it stays in memory, and then you keep reusing it over and over again. So it's kind of this idea of like having something stay in memory. Like you're going to use a little bit more memory, but you want the overall memory usage to be more stable.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's definitely a huge difference between, game design and also app design as well. So, what made you work in the capacity that you're working in instead of working on a game? Going to a game studio, doing your own stuff as you're doing, but saying, okay, I'm going to be part of a game team. It's going to make a game. It's going to come out on Steam. It's going to come out on PlayStation, for example.
I think there's a few things. One of them being if I made it, like for example, if I joined a game studio, first of all, I would need to have some skills on like the engines they would use, because they would probably not do web games. So I would need to pick up Unity or Unreal, which I don't have experience with. And then there's also the reason why I kind of like keeping game dev almost as a hobby for me is that I can build the things I want, and not make my. I don't need to build the games that someone else wants me to build. For example, if I want to make a game, a very specific game that has almost no audience, I can do it because my financial success does not depend on me selling that game well. Um, so I kind of like that aspect of it. For example, recently I've been working on a game where you just jump around and shoot, kind of like Doom and Quake. But I never stopped to think about whether people would want to play it. I just told myself, this is the game I would want to play. I'm going to build it. It's going to take me a few years, but it's not going to be. I'm still going to be able to pay the bill regardless of its success.
I mean, that's totally understandable. And obviously, when you have, you know, the eggs in that one basket and you're trying to make it a success, there's definitely risk involved, also pressure involved. So you're having that separation is good, and because you're still doing coding, so it helps you, mentally speaking, and in terms of the way you solve problems. It's still, there's still that level of separation. So one of the things that people love to discuss, it's become a huge thing on YouTube as well, is like desk setups and like computer setups and environments. Like, what OS is your go-to outside of work, because you have whatever you have for the work, but you'll go to Windows, Mac, or Linux, and why?
Okay. I thought you were going to ask me about my desk setup, and
Yeah.
I was going to tell you that I have the most
I,
horrible setup. It's
I
probably terrible
mean,
for my back.
we will talk about that as well, but first of all, choice of OS, and also choice
um,
of like form factor, like as well. I guess that'll link with your desk setup.
yeah. So you asked about OS kind
Yes.
of things. My go to these days are just I work mostly on Macs, mostly because I want to be able to have somewhat proper terminal support. Like um, I learned a lot of Linux stuff at school, and I got used to like doing things through the terminal. And so for a while, I was using Ubuntu, and I really liked it. But nowadays, I don't really feel like tinkering so much. So um, I like Mac because it's kind of a nice middle ground between super accessible Windows and like very terminal heavy Linux. So I kind of like things to work, but I still want to have be able to like go into the terminal without having to um, tinker with it like I would have on Windows. Like to even get a Bash terminal on Windows feels a little bit hacky to me, for example.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that thing with Linux. Like every year or two, I'll probably try and do kind of a semi Linux switch, and Ubuntu is that go to one. I'll have a go, and it's just doesn't seem to work. Like there'll be driver issues. Like I'll come back, I'll turn it on, and suddenly the NVIDIA drivers have uninstalled, and I'm like, why have you uninstalled? I did nothing. You did nothing. Like, why are you doing this to me? Like, I know Nvidia, like there is that notorious thing with Linux and Nvidia and Linus Torvalds, telling Nvidia to f off. But like, it's not just Nvidia. It's just it, it's so many things around Linux, and it's like that thing. It's you something nicely. You don't want to tinker anymore. It's like I'm getting older as well. Like there were times I could spend 3 hours in a day just to get my computer working every day, and I was happy with that. And now it's like to get 3 hours to spend on your computer outside of work can sometimes be a struggle. So you don't want to be spending it, tinkering. I've heard it's got a lot better over the years, and now it's kind of out of state. So I might try it. I do want to. I tried it a little bit, but I do want to try it more seriously. Pop OS as well, the more gaming oriented one. Have you ever had to go at that or looked at that one?
No, I've never heard of that one. So
Okay, yeah, so
I
yeah,
have nothing useful to add.
Yeah, Pop OS is a Linux-based operating system, and it is more geared towards gaming. And you can use it just for productivity and general use as well. But it's a bit more geared for gaming. It's meant to be a bit more stable. So again, I might check that one. It looks very nice as well. So I definitely take a look at that. So yeah, what's your desk setup looking like these days? And what's your ideal desk setup? And like, what's your like go-to computer? Like, what computer do you have?
um, yeah, so I don't think I'm gonna be an example to follow, but I have a pretty basic setup. Honestly, I have a very cheap gaming chair, and then a very cheap um, monitor for my work desk. I do have two monitors for my more gaming slash work on my hobby kind of stuff, but I don't have any of those like super fancy wide monitors that like kind of go around you, and then nothing like if you ever seen the movie Swordfish, where they have 10 screens in front of them, because
Yes.
I don't personally feel the need for that. I do like I made the switch to mechanical keyboard recently, and I do think that part actually does make a big difference. Um, so if I'm gonna spend money, if anything, it's gonna be on the maybe on the mouse and the keyboard.
The
Um,
accessories around, the
yeah,
experience.
yeah,
Okay, so what's your go-to, keyboard, and more specifically, because you talk about mechanical, what type of switch? Loud, quiet, medium. What's your go-to?
I'm sorry. I'm actually gonna have nothing smart to say about this. I can probably cut it off. Um, I don't know anything about mechanical keyboards, honestly, man.
Okay, is it loud or is it quiet?
I'm
Medium.
more on the quiet side of things. I've worked at an office where someone had a very loud one, and I can see how it's probably extremely enjoyable to type on. Um, but I find it a little bit annoying for people who would sit next to me. So I'm more on the quiet side, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a physical office situation, yeah, that's definitely not. Obviously, if you're at home, you've got a dedicated office, for example, so you don't have family around you, you don't have colleagues around you. Then, yeah, you can go as loud, as you want, and even then, I think, it depends on preference. Not, always louder, but more, I'd say a medium-ish, click. There's definitely quieter ones for my mechanical keyboard. I've got the G915 by, I think it's by Logitech, and I just got it, well, probably like 2 months ago, because I had just done a rejig in terms of moving rooms. I've got a smaller room for my office now because got another child on the way. So, sacrifices had to be made. And I wanted, my other keyboard was a wired one, and I wanted a wireless but like a high end mechanical one, so I could move it around, just, put it somewhere and have more desk space accessible without having more desks. The way I had it in my original office. So yeah, that's the reason I went for that particular one. So yeah, I I do love some of those setups, where they have multiple monitors. Like, you see six monitors, like three monitors on top, three at the bottom, and then you see this other one where they have vertical monitors as well. Right now, I've got two, a 34-inch ultra wide, which I'm staring at it right now. It looks tiny compared to my 49-inch ultra wide, but I remember when I got the 34 back in December 2016, it looks so big, compared to having a 27-inch. I had a Hans G monitor, and like compared to that, the 34-inch looks so big. But now it just looks like a normal monitor to me. But yeah, the 49-inch still to this day, I've had it since 2021. That is, so just about 2.5 years, and it still feels big. Whereas the 34-inch I got used to, but the 49-inch still feels massive. I mean, it's literally two 27 inches sandwiched together.
Yeah, I think monitors are like the one thing I'm gonna upgrade actually probably tomorrow and get something a little bit better. And you know
Yeah.
what? Maybe I'll come back to this and be like, oh, I should have done this ages ago, because it's so much better for working. But yeah, usually I like the basic stuff. Like I don't necessarily need to two monitors to be efficient. I'm just really good at alt tabbing, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that once you have it, you're like, ah, this is so much better. It's like I used to like my main work, like what I'm doing now with the podcast, is on my MacBook. I don't have this docked currently whilst I'm doing the podcast because I don't need to have loads of things open, and I'm sitting on the sofa in the office. It's a bit more comfortable. Then I've got my desktop PC. That used to be the main thing that was connected up to both my monitors and my laptop, which I had transitioned a lot of the work over to, was the thing that I was working with, and that would just be my laptop 16-inch screen, and my PC was used as either like my media server or my content server, or gaming, so it wasn't being used directly all the time with the monitors. And then when I moved office, to here, I ended up getting like a dock for my MacBook, so I could dock that in. It would connect up
Hmm.
to a bunch of accessories, including the monitors. And after using it with the monitors, I was like, oh my god, like having been able to, have two, three windows open at the same time and see everything properly, even just on the 49-inch, because initially I didn't have the 34-inch because I was, sorting out some mounting stuff on the wall. It, even that was, it's one of the things, once you get used to it, it's just like, don't want to go back. I feel like, when you get an even another monitor or a bigger, newer monitor, you'll be like, okay, I really, for certain aspects of work and use, I really do love just using these huge monitors or loads of monitors. Like what do you think is more important, more monitors or bigger monitors? Because again, you could have, let's say, like 627 inches, or maybe two 49 inches and two 27 inches, which technically in terms of real estate equate to the same thing, but there's definitely a different experience using, you know, six versus two or four, for example.
Oh, I don't want to start a war, but I think my gut feeling would be that bigger monitor would probably be better for your neck. So I would probably go with bigger monitor, like instead of having to like constantly look to the side and then wreck your back.
Yeah, or
I think I
looking
would go
up
with the bigger
because
screen.
my secondary one is above, and I am, my neck does get a bit cranky a bit, when I look up. But on the top monitor, I only have my calendar and my to-do list, so I'm not constantly staring at it. It will just be at a quick glance. Okay, what's this time zone, or what do I have on my schedule, or my to-do list. Again, most of the time I'm looking at the main monitor, so that's not much of an issue. But yeah, if you are constantly looking up and down and even left and right,
I was
you know
thinking more left and right. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even up and down, trust me, you do have that thing. But again, the other thing is, I say with up and down, the main issue is how near you are. If it's kind of far enough that it's not that bad, but again, most people probably don't have that luxury due to, space. So again, that's one thing with me, because I'm in a smaller room. I'm pretty close up to it, and that's, nice and immersive with the 49-inch. But the one above, I am like literally looking up. It's like as if I'm in the IMAX and looking up, but it's not as pleasurable as sitting in the IMAX and looking up.
Hmm.
So, as we're nearing the end of the podcast, one thing I always like to do is, a rapid fire round of fun questions. Are you ready for them, Remy?
Uh, I'm gonna say yes, but more like I hope so.
I mean, trust me, they're pretty easy, fun questions. So I think you'll be good with them. So, if you was to run your own, let's say, company slash team slash gaming studio, would you want it to be 10 people or 1,000 people, and why?
um, I think I would want to be at more like 10 people. I think I lean towards more like smaller companies in general. I like the kind of like startup size where you kind of get to know everyone and everyone works together versus having to have like a million managers to get anything done. So I would go with the 10 people and probably even less, to be honest with you.
Okay. And $500,000 up front, no, no, sorry, $5 million up front, or 500,000 a year for the rest of your life, and why?
So 5 million upfront or 500,000 every year.
Yeah, for the rest of your life.
I would. I mean, I'm only 32. I think I'll take the half a million every year. I think it
What
will
would
be
you
more
do?
profitable eventually.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could always invest it. Yeah, actually, that's harder than I thought. Uh, I think I would still take the once a year.
Okay, and what would do like if that suddenly became your reality tomorrow, like 500,000 a year for the rest of your life? What would you start doing?
I would probably start a real estate empire. Um, and I'll probably actually start by like buying myself a house. That would probably be my first thing. Yeah.
Okay, like have you thought about investing in real estate? Before because you gravitated toward that pretty quickly.
Um, I have not really, but I live in an area of Canada where real estate is going crazy. So
It
it
just
would
makes
like
sense.
that's what everyone talks about. It's like, oh, I bought this house 5 years ago, and now it's got like 400,000 extra in value. Like, oh, maybe I should buy now. Um,
Yeah,
it's more like because of the area I'm in, that I'm gravitating towards that.
fair enough. So, what's your favorite board game, movie, and video game?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so what's your favorite board game, your favorite movie, and your favorite video game?
So, favorite board game. I'm actually not a board game person, so I like the
Okay.
very boring ones. Um, I really like Pictionary uh, because I don't I have no drawing skills, but I think I can get an idea across by doing a quick sketch. It will look terrible, but you might get the idea of what I'm doing. And I just think it's fun. Then you asked favorite movie.
Yes.
Um, so I think it would be a tie between Terminator 2 and Planet of the Apes from 1960. I don't remember what year it was. Terminator 2 because it's a badass action movie. It's got Arnold Schwarzenegger, best actor ever. And Planet of the Apes because is the first movie that really got me into sci-fi and into enjoying those older movies.
Okay, so two
Yeah.
classics.
And then what was the last one you asked? Um,
Favorite video game.
favorite video. uh, I can. I'll probably have to quote a few because it kind of comes and goes. I would go with probably Hotline Miami because it's got a sick soundtrack and it's got the kind of quick, fast gameplay that I really enjoy. And then Counter Strike because I've I've always gravitated like I stopped Counter Strike for years and then I always end up getting back to it. And then probably Quake. Quake is where I sink the most time these days.
What, OG Quake or
Um,
newer
I've
version?
I've played a lot of Quake Live, and lately I've been playing Quake Champions. But not so much of the OG Quake. Like I've played it, I've finished it, but the multiplayer is not uh, my cup of tea. I'd rather play the multiplayer on the newer ones.
Okay, what's the community like in Quake Champions right now?
Uh, it's it's some people would call it a dead game. I don't think it's
Mm.
dead at all. I'm able to get games very quickly. It's one of those small but extremely dedicated communities. So there's a lot of people who've been playing it for years and years. So you're gonna get a bunch of 30-year-olds playing it, and some of them are gonna be extremely good at it. So if you play like dual competitively, you have to get ready to get stomped a lot. But it's a game that gives me like it gives me stuff that no other game can give me, like the way, the weapons, the movement, all these things. Like there's something that about arena FPS that I really love, that I can't really get from anything else. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Quake and games like Unreal Tournament as well as some of those classics. It's
Hmm.
obviously they had Unreal Tournament, the newer one that got cancelled. I want to say back in 2017, I think, because obviously the success of Fortnite Battle Royale, Epic cancelled it. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it's a shame that some of these games, like the way Doom and Wolfenstein saw a resurgence and they got revitalized, especially Doom with 2016 and then Doom Eternal. It was an amazing comeback, and in many ways better than the originals as well. Like I think that was great about him. They weren't like, oh, it wasn't just a matter of a franchise that was beloved that's got a new game and you're gonna play it because it's a Doom game. It was like, okay, this is amazing, and I really want to see that with Quake and Unreal Tournament as well. And what I want to see is some single player stuff as well with Quake and then Unreal.
Yeah, I've always been thinking like, give me a campaign in Quake that has the current Quake Champions graphics, and I'm sold.
Oh yeah,
But kind of going back to Doom Eternal, I think we'll look at it. I mean, we're probably already looking at it now, as in there's a before and after Doom Eternal to me. Like Doom 2016 was amazing, but to me, Doom Eternal made it almost obsolete because it was such an upgrade in every way, in my opinion. And you can definitely see like the impact of what that Doom Eternal has had um, on the first person shooter scene. Like I've been playing, so we call them boomer shooters. I don't know if you've heard that term, but it's like all
I
these
haven't
games that
heard
are
that
like,
term, but
yeah, it's all these games that are very heavily inspired by Quake, Doom,
Half
or Duke
Life, I
Nukem.
guess those ones, yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, Half-Life is even starting to get a little bit more recent. But yeah, so like I've been playing a ton of boomer shooters. Like my Steam library is filled with those, and you can kind of tell like what happened, like what Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, what kind of impact they had. Like the grappling hook, for example, is more and more present. I actually built a game recently where the whole hook was that you could shoot around with a grappling hook. And then the mechanics, like the glory kills and like having some more arcadey things, are really showing a lot in boomer shooters lately. So I really think there's a before and after Doom Eternal.
Oh yeah, 100% like Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. It's like Doom Eternal, like the performance and optimization was so good. Like it runs well on
Hmm.
on a Steam Deck, and that is just I think because I've got a Steam Deck, I've tried it on trying 2016 and I've tried Doom Eternal. I'm pretty sure Doom Eternal runs better. Like, and that's crazy to think about. It's a new game, better graphics, better technology. And I just love the way it feels. I love that there was like, yeah, we're gonna put a story in there, but it's a story for story's sake. Like it's the typical, action hero saving the world, not giving, two shits about, anything. It is just about the fun, the action, the music, like the music as well, the soundtrack just went well with that, the gameplay.
Yeah, I can only agree with that. Like I personally really don't like metal in general. Like I'm not really rock or metal kind of person, but the Doom Eternal soundtrack to me is like it's the goat. Like it's so good. I just can't get enough of it.
Oh yeah, like when you're playing Doom 2016 and when you first really get into the battle, section and he just cocks the shotgun and the music, hits literally as soon as, you do that or the character does that. Everything's just feels like it's had care and attention paid into
Mhm.
it. The technical side of it, the graphics, the gameplay, the music, everything. It just fits so well. I can't wait for. I'm sure they'll do another Doom game, and probably some Wolfenstein stuff as well. But again, I really do want to see more Quake and more Unreal, whether it's Unreal Tournament or just Unreal in general. It's been a while since I played Quake Champions. I played it when it first came out. I think when it was in beta or something, and I'm gonna download it again and try and put some hours towards it because I do love those style of games.
Well, I mean, if I got one extra person to play Quake Champions, that's a huge success to me.
I mean, you probably go from 10 people to 11 people in the whole community.
Okay, it's not quite that bad.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. So, what video game are you looking forward to? Because, there's loads of great classics and, games that have come out this year as well. Like, this year has been a great year for gaming with the Gaming Awards just, recently. But what games are you looking forward to?
Um, yeah, I haven't really kept up with what was coming up, but I think there's the new Jurassic Park game that really
Mm,
looks like Alien Isolation.
yes.
I mean,
Hopefully better than Isolation.
I mean, I think Isolation is a fantastic game that I refuse to play again. It's too scary for me. I finished it twice, and it was very difficult for me. I think it's a fantastic game that succeeds at everything it tried to do. Um, but maybe I can tell you the games that I was waiting for very recently. That One of the games that I was really hyped for this year was the new RoboCop game, Rogue City.
Hmm.
Um, I just really like anything that's like around those.
That era, like
Uh,
those classical stuff.
yeah, I mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger earlier. He's kind of representing like this whole type of movie that I really love, like that action, kind of dumb kind of movie. So RoboCop kind of well, RoboCop is definitely not a dumb movie, but it's kind of like that actiony 80s actiony movie. So like when they announced the game, I was super hyped for it, and then people get like just people that were not even in that niche even got excited for it because of everything they showed. That was one of the games I was really waiting for this year, and I played it, and it's absolutely amazing. Um, it's a really amazing double A game. Don't expect triple A, but yeah.
Have you played Terminator Resistance?
I have, and this is what got me hyped for RoboCop. I also thought Terminator was really, really good. Um, if
I
you're into the franchise.
Yeah, I haven't played Resistance yet. I know it's had obviously some upgrades for PS5, Xbox, updates as well. Like, did you play back when it came out? I think what, like 2019 or something. But or did you play the more recent updates too? Because I think the updates has kind of helped with the, let's say, the reviews. Making it a better game from what I've heard.
Yeah, I didn't have a PC when it came out, so and I didn't really want to play it on PS4, so I had to wait a little bit. So I probably got a version that was somewhat patched, and then also finished it again like about a year ago, just before playing the DLC. So I probably played the more patched version, so I had like absolutely no issues with it. Um, and that game was just like um, what do you call it? Like such a love letter to Terminator, and that's all I wanted.
What was the gameplay like? Because sometimes you get games where the story's good, the sound good, but like the gameplay, what you're interacting with, just doesn't feel good. But then you get games like Doom where they don't have really much of a story to of note, but the gameplay is just beautiful. Like how well did it feel? Because you get some shooters that come out and you can tell they're just so clunky and horrible.
Yeah, for the term yeah for the Terminator game, the gameplay was I w- I can't say it's amazing because like most of it is because like I really enjoyed it because it's related to Terminator. Like the enemies are very dumb. There's not a ton of depth to it. Uh, it's in a and a lot of the gameplay is kind of like looking for hidden spots and like exploring the map, um, which I really enjoyed. I've never played Fallout, but I think it kind of felt like how I would picture Fallout to be. Um, Now, if I compare it to RoboCop, the more like that just came out, the shooting was absolutely fantastic at that in that game, um, compared to Terminator. There's definitely been a lot of improvement since like between the two games. They definitely nailed the like kind of walking tank feeling of the game without making it super easy. Um, so yeah.
Okay, yeah, and also I think it's an art in itself to master making the character feel heavy without you feeling sluggish and slow and just not responsive. I feel like a game that did it well was Killzone. You felt like you had weight. Gears of War as well. You felt like you had weight. You wasn't floating around the way you do in Call of Duty, for example. But you felt
Mhm.
responsive as well, and you felt like, okay, I'm actually in the character. Like it takes a bit to get moving. So I'm not gonna just go over there on the map because willy nilly because it might take me a bit of time to get back, for example.
Yeah, I think another game that actually nailed that came out this year was Warhammer Bolt Gun.
Mm.
If you've heard of it, like it's kind of like the same idea of like you feel heavy, when you walk around you feel heavy, but it still feels good. Like you don't feel slow. It just feels right. You feel powerful. Uh,
Okay. Yeah, and then also doing it in a way, like you said, where you don't feel so powerful that everything just feels like it's on easy mode. You're still
Yeah,
having the
well, I
challenge.
think there's a place for that kind of power fantasy where you like destroy everything, but yeah, you do need a little bit of challenge. Otherwise it's not a game. Might as well watch a movie or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes games do it where there's like a particular segment. Maybe you've fully upgraded, or maybe you go into some sort of rage mode, for example. But again, it's not the entirety of the game, and those parts of the game work so well because you have the comparison between the rest of the game where you do struggle a bit, you do die, or you die more, and you don't have infinite health or super high health, the super high ammo and the overpowered gun and etc. Like, it's that comparison as well, because you're like, okay, you know how it was facing 5 enemies, and now you're doing 20 with ease, and you're not even having to hide, and you're just mowing them down. Like, having that comparison, and especially if it's kind of like a rage mode that you can trigger on and off based on some sort of performance, or some sort of like, I'm gonna say bar, something in the game where you top it up. Like, it makes you want to go into the rage mode. It makes you look forward to it. Like, it's a treat. It's a reward almost. It's like the chocolate bar at the end of the week. If you've been on a healthy diet, for example, it tastes nicer than if you're having them every day.
Yeah, it's like it'd be like the quad damage in Quake. Like
Yes.
you find it, you pick it up, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna mow down like 50 enemies,
Yeah.
and it's gonna feel great.
Yeah, and it's because you have it for a limited time, and because you can't have it all the time, and the fact that everyone doesn't have it. That's the reason it feels so amazing. Same with, like, if you pick up a certain weapon as well, or a
Mhm.
certain character. So, final question, two-parter: does money buy you happiness, and what does a good life mean to you?
Oh gosh, this is this is some of the grander questions. I don't think money buys you happiness, but I think poverty surely doesn't like give it to you either. You just need to find. It's like the generic answer to anything. Like you just have to find the balance. Um, and then, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
What does a good life mean to you?
Oh Jesus. I don't know. Do what you enjoy. Take pleasure in it. Um, yeah, I don't really have a like a grand life advice for anyone. Sorry.
Not a problem. I mean, I love the honesty, and I think it's a great way to end the podcast. So I just want to thank you, Remy, for coming on today to talk about, obviously, JS13k, your participation in it. Great that you've been part of it for over a decade now, or a decade now. And I mean, do you plan on continuing that, or now that you've won, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna end it on a high note?
Well, I technically had won it once before and they didn't
Oh, you
stop.
have. Okay.
I think it's more dependent on whether Andrzej wants to keep going, like keeps organizing it. If he
Yeah.
organizes it, like every year, I look forward to it. So if there's a 2024 edition, I'll probably be in it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be a 2024 edition. I spoke to him, recently. I mean, I've recorded a podcast with him as well. So, a week before yours comes out, his will be coming out as well. So, which is really
Ooh,
exciting. Uh,
spoilers.
yeah, spoilers, yeah. So, but yeah, the 2024 competition is, scheduled, not scheduled per se, but it is definitely planned. And I can't remember the other competition he runs where, because I was one of the panel of experts. That's how I was involved this year, and that's how I had the exposure. But there's another competition he said he runs a little earlier, and that won't have a panel of experts, but that is also coming as well. So yeah, he's definitely run the competition, which is great, and I'll look forward to being one of the judges for the next competition as well, and see all the amazing games they made. There was, I think they had over 150 games, developers this year, and I think it's just great, what he's doing, with it, and off his own back, and he started that from nothing, and he's being consistent with it, which is just fantastic. And then obviously you've seen it grow as well, and I'm sure you've seen it change and morph into something, what it is today. The amazing thing that he's built with it.
Yeah. Again, I think the one of the greatest things that he created from it was the community.
Hmm.
Like there's a bunch of people that I met through it that I still interact with, and every year I'm looking forward to the uh, like the tweet fest, like where everyone posts their progress on Twitter, and like we give each other advice, and it's a very unique game jam to me, um, because like you get creativity out of the constraint, um, but but I think it's also like, even though it can be hard, I think it's also very accessible. Like you can put up a game very easily by just like you spin up a canvas, draw a rectangle. Okay, now make that rectangle move at 16 frames per second. Boom, you've got a game. Um, so if anyone is listening and interested, I think you should participate next year.
100%. You know, definitely, an interesting competition, and definitely, something, that's great to be part of. And I look forward to, next year's entries as well. And I look forward to seeing you there and, your game. And hopefully, you never know, you might win for the third time.
Maybe don't jinx it.
So yeah, thank you, Remy, for coming on. Thank you, everyone else, for tuning into this week's episode of FireDEV. It was a little, a cracker of an episode to have this sort of insight in, because like I said last week, I had the insight of the person running it, and then this week I've got the insight of somebody who's been in the competition, been doing it for 10 years, and also a winner 2 times over as well. So thank you, Remy. Thank you, everyone listening, and I'll see you in next week's episode of FireDEV. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me.